Okay, well, second video for today. Basically, I don't want to come across as any kind of a dogmatist in any way, shape, or form. I think this is basically the wrong position to take. What I believe in is, the whole of humanity, based on the psychology that has developed through evolution, is multifaceted. In other words, on the one side, we all have our own psychology, our own egos. On the other hand, there is a sort of collective, I wouldn't call it spirit, but a collective realization that none of us can function completely on our own. This is a utopian vision that we could. So in other words, we're both we're individuals on the one hand, but also function in a larger society as a whole. And unless you subscribe to Thatcherism or some kind of utopian philosophy which denies all of these aspects, which simply posits that society doesn't exist, that it's a figment of our imagination, or that only the individual exists and then forms a society, as the anarcho-capitalists like to do. We're headed in the completely wrong direction here, because all this will foment is more entrenchment, of various positions. The first thing we need to realize as humans is that we're fallible, that we don't know everything. That's basically that's the basics. To some degree, at least science has done that. But I do have to say that not everything that science in and of itself does is, somehow motivated by a true quest for truth. This may be true to a certain degree, but not always. To some degree, any kind of scientific research, today as in the past, requires a certain amount of funding. And where that funding comes from does matter to some degree. So it cannot be entirely dismissed. Now, before the Age of Enlightenment, as we call it, there were all sorts of things being funded. And even in the Age of Enlightenment, the Medicis and other powerful entities in societies funded certain kinds of things. So the funding is not entirely irrelevant here. What is disturbing to some degree in our modern society is who funds what and for what purpose. Now, science, even basic research, can be corrupted by channeling funds towards certain projects. And this simply cannot be denied. It exists. Now, other funding might be available for other projects who are completely contrary to this kind of notion. But it simply cannot be denied by people who really mean well, such as concordance, to place complete trust in scientific inquiry 100%. Certain studies are funded for certain reasons. And it's not conspirational to say that the pharmaceutical industry is not very heavily involved in research and its funding. This is, a very complex problem. I'm not placing uh, pure scientific research into a category which is automatically so corrupted that it presents a gigantic lie. I'm not saying that, but there is a certain type of financial corruption taking place within the scientific community that simply cannot be just shoved away. There was a very, very interesting program, which was, you probably never hear anything like this in the United States. Um, Presented, I'll put a link to it below. Unfortunately, it was presented in German, and these people are not conspiracy theorists of any kind. They include scientists themselves, not pseudoscientists, but actual scientists who are telling you where the funding is coming from and why, and how even basic research is being somehow corrupted by financial motivation, by a profit motive, so to speak. So this is something that cannot be denied within the scientific community here in the United States. The best the scientific community can do is to admit that fact and say, yes, it is taking place, but we try to keep it at bay. But to believe in every single study, simply to put to the forefront, well, this is the latest study and this is what we can rely on, you also have to ask questions as to why it was this latest study to start with. Who funded it? So there are certain conflicts of interest that are taking place. Now, as far as Concordance and his channel is concerned, I think he is somewhat biased in terms of his own integrity. He thinks that everybody that works with him and in his field is has equal integrity, when the larger picture maybe a bit more complicated than that. So I'm not trying to diss Concordance, because he obviously is working in the field, but he's not naive enough to think, I hope, that money does influence research, and what kind of research gets funded and why. So this is my take on science. Now, in terms of pseudoscience, the kind of thing that Concordance is addressing, vaccination, fluoridation, all this kind of stuff. I mean, some of the stuff is just based on entire belief systems which completely reject all science altogether. So yes, I reject that as well. So I concur with Concordance on that subject matter. There are a number of issues, where we agree with, and a certain amount of discordance, actually, when it comes to the funding and where it comes from and why. The motivation behind the why. None of us can be sure, of course, but I take everything with a grain of salt, but not open enough to just accept any kind of crazy theory out there. At some point you have to draw the line someplace. And when I hear people in the United States openly rejecting the theory of evolution, that's where I draw the line. Evolution, the theory of evolution, has nothing whatsoever to do with the origin of the universe. It is a much, much simpler theory than this. The theory of evolution doesn't claim anything about the origin of the universe. This is a completely different subject matter. So that's where I'll end this video for now. And we'll move on to perhaps anarcho-capitalism.